The phone rang at 10:47 p.m. the night before our anniversary flight, and my wife already knew something was wrong before I even answered, because my mother never called that late unless the situation involved my younger sister. My name is Carter Whitfield, and for 2 years my wife and I had been quietly saving money for a trip that was supposed to celebrate something simple but important. 10 years of marriage. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet anniversary vacation in Napa Valley, California. But the moment my mother's voice came through the phone, I could already hear the tension in it. "Carter, I need to ask you something." That sentence had followed me my entire life, and it almost always ended the same way. My sister Sloane Whitfield needed help again. I looked across the living room at my wife, Margot Whitfield. She was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine and a small stack of travel papers spread across the coffee table. Hotel confirmations, flight tickets, reservations we had spent 2 years planning. She watched my face carefully while I listened to my mother explain the situation. "Sloane's in a difficult position," my mother said. "She and Reed had an argument tonight. Reed Calloway was Sloane's fiancé, or at least he had been until that evening. They're postponing the wedding," my mother continued, "and she needs somewhere to stay for a while." I stayed quiet, because I could already feel where the conversation was going. "She's really upset, Carter. And honestly, she could use the kind of trip you and Margot planned." The sentence hung in the air for a moment like something that hadn't fully landed yet. Then my mother said the part that made my chest tighten. "You two could always travel another time." I rubbed my forehead slowly, because technically she wasn't wrong. Trips could be rescheduled. Flights could be refunded. Hotels could be rebooked. But the thing she didn't mention was everything behind that trip. 2 years of skipped weekends out. 2 years of quietly transferring money into a savings account labeled Napa. 2 years of promising Margot that this time our plans would actually happen without interruption. Margot had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. She didn't say anything. She just leaned back slightly and waited. Because in our marriage there was one rule we had learned the hard way. If my family created a problem, the decision about how to respond had to come from me. Otherwise, resentment would quietly grow where love was supposed to be. Before we go further, let me ask you something. If you spent 2 years saving for something meaningful with your partner, and your family asked you to give it up at the last minute to help someone who had a history of creating their own chaos, what would you do? Would you sacrifice the trip to keep the peace? Or would you protect the one promise that belonged only to you and your spouse? Because the truth is, families often assume the most responsible person will always be the one who sacrifices. And for most of my life, that person had been me. I ended the call after promising my mother I would think about it. Then I placed the phone on the coffee table next to the travel documents. Margot looked at me calmly. "What happened?" she asked. I explained the situation carefully. Every detail. Sloane's argument with Reed. The postponed wedding. My mother's suggestion about the trip. Margot listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "That makes sense," she said. I blinked. "You think we should give them the trip?" She shook her head gently. "No." Then she said something that surprised me. "But I do understand why your mother asked." I waited for her to continue. "Your family has spent years believing that you're the one who fixes things," she explained. "So when something goes wrong, they automatically assume you'll be the one who adjusts." She wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She was simply describing a pattern that had quietly existed for years. "And the real question," she added, "is whether you still want that role." That sentence stayed in the room for a long time, because it wasn't really about a trip. It was about something deeper. The difference between helping family and allowing family to control the direction of your life. The next morning, I called my mother back. She answered immediately, like she had been waiting beside the phone all night. "Carter." "Yes." "Did you talk to Margot?" "I did." There was a hopeful pause on the other end of the line. "So?" I took a slow breath before answering. "We're still taking the trip." Silence filled the call. Not angry silence, just surprised silence. "But Sloane really needs." "She needs support," I agreed. "And I'll help her find somewhere to stay." Another pause. "But the trip stays ours." My mother sighed quietly. "I just thought, given everything, you might want to help your sister." "I don't want to help her," I said calmly. "But helping someone doesn't always mean giving up something important to your own life." The conversation ended politely, but without the usual warmth. And for a moment, I wondered if I had made the wrong choice. Until that evening when Margot and I boarded our flight to California. As the plane lifted off the runway, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for choosing us this time." That sentence made something inside me settle in a way I hadn't realized was missing. Because sometimes the strongest marriages are built not just on love, but on the moments when someone finally decides their partner deserves to come first. And strangely enough, the biggest surprise came 3 days later when my sister called me from Charleston. Her voice sounded calmer than I expected. "I heard you went on the trip," she said. "I did." There was a small pause. Then she laughed quietly. "You know what? What? You probably made the right decision." I didn't answer right away, because sometimes growth happens quietly, and the people who once depended on your sacrifices eventually learn to stand on their own.